His life didn't begin with hope. It began with a curse. Born with the mark of the demon king, the young noble was branded as a failure, the shame of his household, the omen of his family's fall. And fall they did. His father vanished. His brothers disappeared. The entire noble line crumbled until he was the only one left, alone, powerless, and hunted. Then came the nightmare that broke him, kidnapped, beaten, tortured so brutally that he prayed for death. His final moments were nothing but agony, the last chapter of a miserable life cursed from the very start. But fate twisted. When he opened his eyes again, he wasn't in chains. He was back in the past, back before the fall, back before the torture, back before the curse destroyed everything. This time, he won't accept despair. This time, he won't be the cursed loser. This time, he will rewrite destiny itself. He suddenly wakes up to a voice calling him by the title Young Master. Finding himself sweating with shock on his face, he recognized with astonishment his maid Colin, who looked younger than he remembered, wondering why she was there, while she was worried about his health and him overworking himself. He wondered to himself why the nanny of the Sermon family was standing before him in her youthful appearance. So he asked her nervously and quickly to bring him a mirror. He looked in the mirror to find his reflection as a small child. So he asked Colin about today's date, and she told him it was August 17th, 1892. According to the Da calendar, he realized with astonishment that this date meant he had returned to being 12 years old, and this time coincided in his memory with the moment his family's tragedy began. He remembered that the fall of the Sermon family began at this time at the hands of the Fetton family and recalled the god's words about granting the wish. While wondering if he had really returned to the past, he heard the sound of footsteps coming, and a majestic man entered. Thinking the boy was feigning illness again to evade his duties, he immediately recognized the man as Alejandro, the commander of the Sermon Knights, who in turn noticed the boy's pale face. So he allowed him to skip today's training. Colin tried to intervene anxiously, but he stopped the commander and smiled confidently, confirming he was fine. He asked about the content of today's training, and Alejandro was surprised by his refusal to rest, explaining that the training was dedicated to long sword footwork. The commander stared at him suspiciously and asked if he was really the young master, so he confirmed his identity as Ryan Sermon without a doubt. He decided within himself that the reason for his return, whether it was a wish or turning back time, didn't matter now, and surprised everyone by asking to skip basic training and head directly to hunt monsters, while a blue aura surrounded him. He was certain that this was his chance to correct everything, and he activated the status window to see that he was at level 1 and still carried the arc and curse of rank SS, preventing him from gathering mana. He felt relieved that his ability to use this unique power, possessed by no one else on the continent, persisted even after going back in time. Alejandro returned again to announce that he had prepared the monster for him to fight. He arrived at the training ground and a goblin appeared before him, screaming savagely. The monster tried to attack him, but it was tied to the wooden post. So Colin screamed in terror, begging the Knight Commander to stop the fight, reminding him that the young master usually fainted just at the sight of a goblin. But he was thinking that her words were true for him yesterday, not for who he is now. He realized the difference clearly at that moment, as system warnings rang in his mind, announcing the activation of the arc and curse, which began to forcibly amplify his fear of monsters. He realized then that this unjustified terror was nothing but part of the demonic curse's effect. Alejandro noticed his tension and suggested calling it a day for training, but he rejected that idea immediately, refusing to give up and rushed towards the bound goblin. But he stopped suddenly out of fear and screamed internally to maintain his composure, reminding himself that he was no longer that weakling from the past, and that his opponent was just a lone goblin. He sharpened his resolve, confirming his ability to face it, for compared to the horror he lived before that that divine entity, this curse seemed trivial and insignificant. He lunged with a strong strike of his wooden sword, amidst the commander's astonishment and Nanny Collins' shock at what their eyes were seeing. At that moment, a system notification appeared announcing the regression of the curse's rank, after he managed to overcome it through an experience that exceeded its limits, causing his feeling of fear to vanish completely. He turned confidently towards the commander, asking for a real sword. And while Colin tried to express her concern, the commander handed the sword to the boy, whose face bore a bold smile. The knight commander saw in that stance proof that the young master had truly become a man. He advanced towards the goblin with all courage and determination, to finish off the trembling monster with a decisive blow. The commander saw in him a ray of hope shining to save the crumbling Sermon family, inviting Colin to watch the scene, confirming without a doubt that this boy is the true heir and future leader of the family. After the fight ended, he stood washing his face, concluding that the status window and the system's help were effective in aiding him to conquer the curse, which confirmed to him the possibility of growing his power. He noticed his experience points increased, but showed annoyance at their meager amount, realizing that at this rate he would need to kill thousands of monsters to raise his level. He felt the need to hurry, as the day when screams would fill the Sermon household was imminent. Despite that, he remained holding on to the fact that he could break Arkan's curse, determined not to miss this opportunity, no matter the cost. He assessed the Sermon family's current situation, recalling that 2 years had passed since his father and older brothers disappeared. Despite the precarious situation, the family still maintained its status as one of the great houses, as the enemies hadn't started their schemes yet, and since he had verified the first method to raise his level through fighting, a confident smile appeared on his face. Resolving to verify the second method, he headed to meet the woman with red hair and a blue mask. She initiated the conversation, mentioning she heard the news of him hunting the goblin, wondering disapprovingly if he had summoned her for magic training. That woman was Sina, commander of the magic corps in the Sermon family, a grand mage of the 7th Circle whose power rivals Alejandro. She is a mysterious figure whose truth is known only to the family head, and she warned him against arrogance just for killing a weak monster. Sina reminded him that magic training differs from the sword, and that Arkan's curse stripped him of any talent to sense mana or academic excellence. He admitted knowing that fact, and that his body was incapable of sensing energy. But he surprised her that this was his state only until yesterday, challenging her by asking if she doubted his ability to sense mana. Signs of astonishment appeared on her face. To verify his claim, she drew a magic formation and allowed him to open his eyes. She told him she drew an image that could only be seen through mana. He stared ahead with focus while she asked him to identify what she drew. He answered clearly that he saw a beautiful red dragon, which struck Sina with a shock that silenced her tongue. She confirmed the correctness of his vision with a stammer and denied that he was mistaken. She wondered with amazement how this radical change occurred, especially since she had placed camouflage mechanisms to make the drawing look like something else, meaning his understanding of mana rivaled her level. She inquired about how he broke the family curse, even though she had previously only taught him how to sense. He called her by her name, confessing that although he sensed mana, he was unable to use the cultivation method inherited in the family, asking for her help with that. Sina explained that mana cultivation is essential to raise one's level, pointing to his previous attempt. But she warned him seriously about the danger of his request because channeling mana meant tearing the energy pathways in his body, placing his life and death entirely in her hands. He met her warning with a sarcastic smile, asking if she intended to kill him, pointing out his inability to resist her anyway, but he confirmed she was the only person he could ask this of. He recalled in his memory the events of his past life and the attack they were subjected to, where Sina fought fiercely to protect him despite running out of energy and her body being shattered. She kept protecting him until the end as his subordinate. He returned to his reality, looking at her with eyes full of certainty, telling her he trusted her more than anyone anyone else. He took off his shirt in preparation for Sina to announce the start of the process. Sina watched with amazement his learning speed, noticing he had already started using the blue earth technique to channel mana, even though she had only explained the theory to him, a technique inherited only by the direct lineage of the family within himself. He attributed this mastery to his previous training with this method in the world of Adon to raise his level and abilities. Sina asked him for total focus, warning him of severe pain he might feel, and stressing the necessity of not making any sound or moving violently. Sina emphasized that he should seriously consider stopping if the pain became unbearable, and as soon as the pain began to course through his body, he remembered the pain he suffered while being tortured by Sans in his past life. He reproached her, asking if she didn't trust him, so Sina confirmed she understood what he wanted and pumped more mana into his body. Suddenly, system warnings went off, announcing the activation of the Archon curse, causing the mana trapped inside his body to disperse and scatter. Sina realized the curse worked exactly as the family had described, but she had expected this beforehand. Sina decided to pump more mana into his body, igniting a confrontation between the curse trying to disperse the energy and Sina's mana trying to conquer it. Amidst successive system notifications seen only by him, it seemed to him the result was decided in favor of the curse, while Sina was bleeding and suffering. Realizing that even the mana of a 7th Circle Grand Mage was unable to conquer this maximum grade curse, at that decisive moment he decided to apply Adon's special training method, determined to make the curse, tearing the mana rebound upon itself, trapping the dispersion range inside his body. He succeeded in tricking the curse and kept the mana trapped inside him while his body glowed with energy. So, Sina noticed with astonishment that the dispersed mana did not leave her young master's body. System notifications followed, confirming his resistance to the Archon curse, and the resistance continued successfully. He felt burning heat and pain igniting along the mana movement pathways, but he refused to surrender to this pain, drawing his strength from the fact that he endured similar pains thousands of times as the master player in Adon. He was confident that his understanding of mana surpassed anyone else, because this understanding was etched in his soul, not just his body. He mocked Archon, the demon king he had never seen, considering his curse negligible compared to that so-called god of Adon. The curse cracked and shattered under his will, and he fell to the ground amidst Sina's screams calling out to him. As his consciousness faded from the intensity of the pain, he reassured himself that he was fine, comparing this pain to what he suffered in his previous life, remembering when he was a captive of the Fetton family, subjected to limb amputation and regeneration experiments. One of the men suggested getting rid of the prisoner quickly and returning to the Fetton family, considering this the optimal solution to the pitiful situation. At that moment, the blade of a hidden warrior slashed through, cutting down Fetton's men, causing the guards' shouts to rise, warning of intruders and demanding to stop them amidst the utter chaos. He suddenly found himself lying in the open under the moonlight, wondering with astonishment how he reached the outside, only to hear a faint voice asking if he was conscious. Alejandro appeared before him covered in blood, apologizing with deep regret for his delay in arriving. He realized then that the Knight Commander had indeed come to save him. Alejandro, with a face full of pain, repeated his apology to his young master, while his body seemed weighed down by arrows that had pierced him. He couldn't control himself and exploded into a hysterical crying scream. He woke up in his bed in the present, with tears wetting his face. Recalling that painful memory, he wondered if the mana cultivation process had succeeded, but his joy vanished immediately due to the nightmare of the past haunting his sleep. Despite that, he reassured himself that tragedy would not repeat, because he now possessed the means to change destiny, stressing the necessity of keeping this means a secret from everyone. He realized he had to exercise the utmost caution, especially with the Fetton family known for its high vigilance, admitting he still lacked the necessary power to confront them. Therefore, he decided his next step must be accelerating the apparent collapse of the Sermon family as part of his plan. He painted an artificial smile on his face before Sina and Alejandro, claiming with regret that he failed in the mana purification method, which sparked Sina's astonishment and denial. Silence and disappointment hung over the room. While he thought internally that he wasn't hiding the secret out of a desire to deceive, but because he doubted the truth would benefit them or that they would believe it in the first place. He justified his attempt by saying he wanted to meet everyone's high expectations, but the result was failure, confirming to Sina that he felt not a speck of mana in his body currently, inviting her to check for herself if she wanted. Sina didn't believe what he said and asked permission to verify herself. Sina tried using mana detection magic to confirm, but she was shocked by the complete disappearance of the energy trace, muttering in disbelief that the mana had truly vanished. She kept assuring herself she clearly sensed the mana flow in his body yesterday and left the place staggering from the intensity of shock and confusion. Alejandro tried to comfort his master, asking him not to feel great disappointment, reminding him of his success in hunting the monster as motivation to focus on sword training. He replied that he wouldn't be able to repeat that experience again due to the terrible pain that made even eating difficult as Nanny Colin heard. Alejandro was shocked by that reply, and his hopes were completely shattered. 2 months later, Colin stands in front of his room. Colin thinks with sadness that the young master continued his isolation inside his room for the next day in a row. She adds that in the absence of the family head, the madam strove to preserve the family legacy, but her powers had begun to run out against the increasing pressures. One of the servants asked Nanny Colin if her master had stayed in his room again, and she confirmed it with regret. The servant commented that 3 months had passed since the monster defeated him in the training ground, and rumors spread that he no longer listened even to the commander's instructions. Another servant adds that a sudden change in a person's nature might be a bad omen or death, considering what happened merely a fleeting dream. Colin defended him sharply, confirming he did his best that day to live up to everyone's expectations. But she was shocked when the servant told her he is nicknamed the disgrace of the Sermon family and the delinquent, not just inside the palace, but throughout the kingdom of Darren entirely. Despite Colin feeling the cruelty of this judgment on a 12-year-old child, the servant explained that disappointment is equal to expectations, especially for a crumbling noble family. With increasing staff resignations, the servant announced he would leave as well by the end of the month and asked Colin about her intention. In his room, he noticed the decline in food quality, deducing the family's financial situation had reached a critical stage. But instead of worry, a sly smile appeared on his face. Considering everything was going according to his plan, if he were his past self, he would have spent the remaining wealth in desperate attempts. But now, with Adon's experience, he realizes he must wait. He decided to remain static to make his enemies lower their defenses, awaiting the right moment to pounce on them. The collapse began with the disappearance of the family head, followed by the failure of search campaigns that drained the remaining strength and resources. The training grounds that once bustled with life became empty, containing only a few incompetent knights and unenthusiastic servants. Even the vassals who courted the family turned their backs and fled after seeing the disaster. This isolation allowed him the freedom to pretend to lock himself up, but he felt the pace of collapse was slower than it should be, so he decided to push more to accelerate the family's apparent fall. Suddenly, Colin burst into his room energetically. Announcing training time and the commander's insistence on seeing him, he tried to evade, showing his desire to rest, but she surprised him by pulling the covers off him, and she carried him like a small child amidst his astonishment. Colin announced with determination that she would never leave the Sermon family, which made him smile awkwardly at this embarrassing situation. In the training ground, Commander Alejandro scolded his young master on how he held the sword, trying to encourage him that failing to sense mana once doesn't mean the end, and that sword training would make mana flow naturally. Features of anger appeared on Alejandro's face, seeing him hide again, noting they hadn't given up yet. In contrast, he was burning with enthusiasm to repay their loyalty, but he insisted on keeping his night training a secret. Using the body control skill he learned in Adon, an assassination technique that deceives others regarding the body's condition, which had already been partially activated. System notifications followed, announcing an increase in experience points, endurance, and strength by 1 point, while he tried to hide it, claiming he needed to go to the bathroom suddenly. Alejandro was confused and tried calling him, while he noticed his control over the skill was still unstable and broke upon sudden movement. He opened the status window to find he reached level 3 with marked improvement in strength, agility, endurance, and mana, and the curse rank dropped to B. He rejoiced at this smooth progress after 3 months of secret training, planning to focus on raising his level significantly once his stats reached 20, setting his sights on obtaining the ghost profession first, as he did in Adon, then developing the necromancer and assassin skills. His thinking was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected guest with Alejandro. The guest was Truno Held, the head butler of the Surman family, who apologized for the interruption. He realized the situation differed from what happened before he turned back time, but the timing clearly pointed to the content of the letter he carried. He began reading the letter's content in front of Alejandro. The letter's contents were an invitation to attend the birthday party of the second prince of the kingdom of Darren, Kyle Darren, in December 1892. He remembered that day was the final piece in the puzzle of the Surman family's fall. He yawned with boredom while in the carriage on his way to the birthday party, so Truno asked if he had just woken up, pointing to his deep sleep throughout the journey, while he justified it by Colin staying up late to choose his clothes. He remembered how excited Colin was preparing clothes befitting an entry to the capital, and how she insisted on accompanying him. Truno expressed his understanding given that Alejandro and Sina would not accompany him. He was surprised by the timing of the appearance of a massive horde of monsters, and he too wondered about that timing. The primary role of the Surman family is preventing monsters of the Dark Zone from crossing to the continent of Drea, and Alejandro had been sent to the border to deal with that. As for Sina, she left upon an urgent request from his mother, who manages family affairs in the husband's absence, and there was no room for refusal. Thus, a 12-year-old child finds himself representing his family in the capital, while Truno seeks to reassure him that there is nothing to worry about, and that no one in the kingdom of Darren dares to touch the direct lineage of Surman. He thought to himself that this was true in the past. Previously, sending a servant to congratulate was enough. But now, with the decline of the family status, the personal attendance of the family head became mandatory. He admitted to himself his responsibility for this situation, but considered it part of his plan. The procession arrived at the royal capital Darbon, and he stepped out of the carriage in front of a crowd of greeters. Prince Kyle welcomed him with a smile, calling him the Dragon of Drea. The second prince of the kingdom of Darren, Kyle Darren, appeared with features bearing cunning and confidence. Truno exchanged greetings with him formally, expressing honor at the invitation and thanks for the hospitality received from the kingdom. He was cynical about the concept of that hospitality, recalling his journey from the city gate to the royal palace, where he clearly felt looks of pity and concern cast by citizens towards the crumbling Surman family carriage. He noticed that rumors describing him as a troublemaker and desperate had successfully spread, and that everyone was talking about the reality of his family's fall. He also clearly sensed looks of contempt and hidden mockery in the noble's eyes, but that only increased his confidence. So, he smiled in secret, confirming to himself that everything was going exactly according to plan. He welcomed the second prince with a voice full of hesitation and shyness, while wondering to himself if he should continue playing along with their rhythm. On the other side, the escorts and guards were grumbling, pointing out they arrived a full week before the party, yet he hadn't left his room for 5 days. They expressed their displeasure at losing the chance to interact with other envoys, mocking the young master for being so shy he was unable to greet nobles properly. Their complaints escalated about not being able to enjoy the festivities held at the palace, including food, drink, and women due to being stuck with him. Their grumbling was cut off by a colleague entering panting, bringing them good news that the young master finally decided to attend today's banquet. He asked his escorts to get ready as well, so their faces lit up with joy and they celebrated the chance to finally attend the banquet. But the joy was conditional, as he asked them to keep the matter secret until the event time and tell no one, not even Truno. Despite some worry about lack of readiness, their desire to attend the party overshadowed any other fears. He thought his appearance would calm his escort's complaints. Taking advantage of the past days, he spent training freely without distractions. He confirmed to himself that his attendance at the banquet wasn't just to appease the escorts, but because he had a much bigger goal he sought to achieve. Outside, a luxurious carriage arrived from which a young man with white hair and red clothes stepped out, announcing in his mind the arrival of Sans Faton. Shouts rang out, announcing the entry of young Master Sans Faton, who walked with confident steps amidst the attendees. Truno welcomed Sans, telling him that Sans coming personally would come as a shock to Prince Kyle. Sans approached Truno with a malicious smile, indicating his knowledge of the Sermon family's arrival first, and asking sarcastically about the whereabouts of the famous Ryan Sermon. Truno was confused by this question, while Sans continued his mockery, claiming everyone must have heard the news, intending the news of the Sermon family's fall and his story. At that moment, Truno was assessing him, acknowledging that Sans is a talented mage who reached the 5th circle at 15, backed by his great family's expectations. Truno denounced that someone dared insult the Sermon family in the banquet hall of the Mother Kingdom. But Sans quickly confirmed with a malicious smile that rumors describing him as the biggest scum on the continent couldn't be true, demanding punishment for whoever spread them for defaming a noble family's reputation. Truno thought to himself angrily, pointing to Sans's history of drinking alcohol since age 7 and killing a commoner at 12, wondering how someone like him dared insult the Sermon family. At that moment, the Chamberlain announced loudly the entry of Ryan Sermon, Dragon of Drea, and young master of the Sermon family. Astonishment prevailed in the hall, and Truno wondered about the reason for his sudden exit. After locking himself in his room, he entered in elegant clothes and a confident appearance, completely different from the rumors spread about him. The attendees whispered with admiration, pointing to his dignified appearance, suggesting no fall of the family and confirming that the noble Sermon blood cannot be hidden. Sans noticed the attention shifting away from him and the spotlight returning to Ryan once the name Sermon was mentioned, which sparked his anger and intense jealousy. He advanced towards Sans, confidently asking if he was Sans Faton, mentioning he heard a lot about him from his brother Ross. The atmosphere tensed at the mention of Raz, the missing 4th son of the Sermon family. Sans replied coldly that he also knew many stories. He continued provoking him, reminding Sans that they studied together at the academy and that everyone there certainly heard about Sans's rumors. Even though he left after a few months, Sans felt angry and called him a bastard. He pressed more, pointing to Sans's bullying incident of a student and harassing a female student. He tried to recall more details, asking about the knee story. Truno intervened quickly to calm the situation, saying, Sans brought good medicine for Raz when he suffered knee pain. Then he grabbed his hand, telling him there was something the Knight Commander told him that he forgot to mention, then pulled him away, asking him to follow. This talk sparked Sansa's furious anger, remembering a past insult that shouldn't be revealed. He looked at him angrily, realizing he was threatening him. He whispered to himself, inciting him to get angrier, considering in secret that Sans's anger is a crucial seed for his plan. Later, Sans cursed his opponent, remembering when he told him everyone knows the rumors about him and that his brother Ross had told him a lot about him. Sans confirmed that Ross knew what happened and how he didn't just leave the academy, but was expelled, and his family used its influence to silence him and prevent the scandal from leaking, especially the humiliating knee story. He went back in his memory to that humiliating moment when he knelt to Raz. Sans tried to control his nerves with difficulty, panting from the intensity of anger and fear. Meanwhile, Raz appeared emitting a powerful aura, announcing coldly that Sans had crossed a line he should never have crossed. In the midst of those moments, Sans recalled a painful memory from the past, where he appeared stammering in his justifications before Raz, claiming he didn't know the girl was his girlfriend. Trying to convince him he only sought to show kindness towards a commoner student who entered the academy. But Raz interrupted him firmly, reminding him the girl was their colleague in the academy, regardless of her origin, scolding him for using magic to harm a student, before ordering him with a tone brooking no argument to kneel immediately and ask for her forgiveness sincerely, threatening him with dire consequences if he didn't. Raz's features froze with a terrifying look as he threatened, while Sans knelt humiliated under the weight of the blue magical aura released by Raz, who swore he would abandon his family name and kill him if necessary. Sans returned to his current reality, screaming madly, holding his head from the intensity of rage and frustration possessing him, trying to control his nerves and remind himself of the necessity to move forward with his plan, resolving that even if he failed to take revenge on Raz, he must at least silence his younger brother. He wiped the sweat from his face, and a malicious smile appeared on his lips, vowing a cruel fate awaited him soon. Meanwhile, knocking was heard on the door, so Sans permitted the knocker to enter. And the head butler, Truno Held, entered the luxurious cabin while Sans commented sarcastically on this secret meeting, bringing him together with a figure of unexpected weight in the middle of the night. While the carriage was making its way, he was reviewing the party events in his mind. Certain everything went exactly as he planned, he succeeded in shedding the image of the hateful rumor-monger and brilliantly played the role of the smart but unlucky family heir, lacking knight and mage talents, making Sans Faton swallow the bait completely.